The word sliced through the dim bar like a knife, sharp and dripping with disbelief. "There's no way you're one of us, old man." What happened next would make an entire room of hardened warriors fall silent. What this disabled 79-year-old veteran said, just 2 words, would bring a Delta Force colonel to his knees. You have to see how this ends. This story will shock you, make you feel something deep, and restore your faith in respect and honor, because sometimes the most dangerous men in the room are the ones nobody sees coming. William Parker, Bill to anyone who'd ever bothered to know him, didn't flinch. He sat perfectly still on his worn bar stool, his weathered hands wrapped around a sweating glass of bourbon. At 79 years old, his body told the story of a hard life. A steel rod in his left leg that made him drag it slightly when he walked, a hearing aid tucked behind his right ear, and hands so gnarled with arthritis that some mornings he could barely button his own shirt. To everyone in O'Malley's bar on this quiet Thursday night in Fayetteville, North Carolina, Bill was just another fixture. He'd been coming here 3 nights a week for the past 12 years. Same stool, same drink, same silence. He never bothered anybody, never told war stories, never asked for thanks or recognition. He just wanted to be left alone. But tonight, that wasn't going to happen. The voice belonged to a kid, well, a man technically, but to Bill, anyone under 40 was still a kid. His name was Ethan, and he was leaning against the bar now, all coiled muscle and cocky energy under a fitted black T-shirt. Maybe 29-30 tops, short military haircut, the kind of build you only get from serious training, and eyes that never stopped moving, always scanning, always assessing. Ethan wasn't alone. 4 more just like him occupied the corner booth. Mason, a brick wall of a man with shoulders that barely fit through doorways. Liam, wiry and intense with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Noah, the youngest of the group, couldn't be more than 26. And Oliver, who had the careful, calculating eyes of a sniper. They were Delta Force operators, though they'd never say it out loud. Off duty, trying to blow off steam after weeks of training that would break normal men. They'd had a few beers, gotten loud, and now Ethan had noticed something that pissed him off. The patch on Bill's jacket. It was draped over the back of his stool, an old, faded field jacket that had seen better decades. On the left shoulder was a patch so worn and threadbare you could barely make out what it once was. Some kind of dark circle, maybe a skull, maybe wings. The years had eaten away at it until it was just a ghost of fabric. "I'm serious, man," Ethan continued, his voice getting louder, drawing attention from the other patrons. "What unit you claim you were with?" "Because that patch looks like something you bought at a goddamn yard sale." Bill took a slow sip of his bourbon. The burn was familiar, comforting. He'd hoped the kid would get bored and walk away. He should have known better. "Just an old jacket," Bill said quietly, his voice rough like gravel. "Don't mean nothing anymore." Wrong answer. To men like Ethan, men who'd earned every single ribbon and tab on their own uniforms through blood, sweat, and brothers lost, the idea of stolen valor was a personal insult. It was spitting on graves, and this old man's evasiveness, that was basically a confession. "Don't mean nothing?" Ethan repeated, his tone hardening. "Nah, see, that's what all the fakes say. They wear the uniform, the patches, the medals, and when you ask them about it, suddenly it's, 'I don't want to talk about it,' or 'it was a long time ago.'" Mason had gotten up from the booth now, standing behind Ethan. "Come on, bro. Leave the old guy alone," he said, but there was a grin on his face. He wasn't trying that hard to stop it. Bill could feel it happening, the walls closing in, the energy shifting. He'd been in enough tight spots to recognize when a situation was about to go sideways. His heart rate didn't change. His breathing stayed steady. But somewhere deep in his mind, old instincts were waking up, stretching, remembering. "Look," Bill said, turning to face Ethan directly, for the first time. His pale blue eyes, eyes that had seen things these young soldiers couldn't imagine, met the operator's stare. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just having a drink. You boys have a good night." He started to turn back to his bourbon, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Ethan's hand shot out and grabbed the jacket, pulling it off the stool. "Now, we're not done. You're going to tell me what unit this patch is from, or I'm going to assume you're a lying piece of—" "Ethan." It was Noah, the youngest, his voice carrying a note of warning. Maybe we should what? Ethan snapped, whirling on his teammate. Let some old faker disrespect every man who actually served? Let him walk around wearing shit he didn't earn? He turned back to Bill, holding the jacket up. My brothers died for patches like this. Real soldiers. So yeah, I'm going to ask one more time. What unit? The entire bar had gone quiet now. Conversations died. Pool cues stopped moving. Everyone was watching. Olivia, the bartender who'd owned O'Malley's for 15 years, felt her stomach drop. She'd seen Bill come in here hundreds of times. She knew he was a veteran. Something about the way he carried himself, the way he'd sometimes stare at nothing for long minutes, lost in memories he'd never share. She'd also seen groups like Ethan's before. Young, alpha, dangerous. When they got worked up, this was going to go bad. Real bad, please, Olivia called out, her voice strained. He's a regular. He doesn't cause trouble. Just leave him be. Ethan ignored her. All 5 operators were standing now, forming a loose semicircle around Bill's stool. They weren't touching him yet, but the threat was clear. The energy was aggressive, dominant, hunting. You know what I think? Ethan said, his face inches from Bill's now. I think you bought that jacket at Goodwill. I think you're sitting here playing pretend, hoping someone will buy you a drink and call you a hero. I think you're a fraud. Bill's jaw tightened. For just a moment, something flickered behind those pale blue eyes, something cold and sharp and absolutely lethal. It came and went so fast that if you blinked, you'd miss it. But Ethan saw it. And for just a fraction of a second, some primal part of his brain screamed a warning, danger. Back off now, he ignored it. Ego and whiskey are a hell of a combination. That's it, Ethan declared, reaching for Bill's arm. You and me are going to take a walk down to the MP station. Let them sort out what kind of bullshit story you've been. His hand closed around Bill's forearm. The old man didn't resist, didn't pull away. But his eyes went somewhere else. Somewhere dark, the smell of bourbon and old wood vanished, replaced by jungle humidity so thick you could drink it. The dim bar lights became the green-black canopy of a Vietnamese forest. 1971. Bill wasn't 79 anymore. He was 28, face-painted, carrying 60 pounds of gear, every sense dialed to maximum. The man next to him, David, his team leader, his brother, was bleeding out from a chest wound. They were the last 2 left. The mission had gone to hell. Enemy forces were closing in. David's shaking hand pressed something into Bill's palm. The patch. The Titan patch. You're 3 now. David gasped through blood-filled lungs. Don't let them forget, Bill blinked. The jungle vanished. The bar came back into focus. Ethan was still gripping his arm, still talking, but Bill barely heard him. Olivia had seen enough. These boys had no idea what they were doing. She could see it in Bill's face. Not anger, not fear. Something worse. Resignation. The look of a man who'd been here before, who'd been doubted and disrespected despite paying prices these kids couldn't fathom. She turned and walked quickly to the small office behind the bar, shutting the door. Her hands were shaking as she opened the old metal lockbox in her desk drawer. Inside was a laminated card with a single phone number written in permanent marker. 3 years ago, a retired Army general had come into O'Malley's. He'd recognized something in Bill, the same way wolves recognize other wolves. Before leaving, he'd pulled Olivia aside. That man at the bar, the general had said, is someone very, very important. If anyone ever gives him trouble, the kind of trouble that involves a uniform, you call this number. Don't ask questions, just call. Olivia had never used it. Until tonight. She dialed with trembling fingers. It rang once, twice. JSOC Operations Center. This is Sergeant Davis. The voice was professional, bored even. Hi, my name is Olivia. I'm calling about a man named William Parker, she said quickly. I own a bar in Fayetteville, and there's a situation. Some soldiers, young guys, look like special forces. They're harassing him. They won't leave him alone. They think he's faking his service, and it's getting aggressive, and Ma'am, the voice interrupted, I appreciate the call, but we don't typically get involved in civilian disputes. Have you contacted local... William Parker, Olivia repeated firmly. That's the name I was told to give you if there was ever trouble. There was a pause. Then the soft clicking of a keyboard. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. 10. 15. When Sergeant Davis spoke again, his entire tone had changed. The boredom was gone, replaced by something that sounded like shocked disbelief. "Ma'am, I need you to confirm the location right now." Olivia rattled off the address. More clicking. Then, "Do not let anyone leave. Keep them there. We're sending people immediately. Who are you sending? Should I call the police or—" "Ma'am, trust me. The people coming are way beyond police. Just keep everyone calm if you can. Help is 3 minutes out." The line went dead. In the Secure Operations Center at Fort Bragg, Sergeant Michael Davis stared at his screen, his coffee forgotten, his blood running cold. The name William Parker had triggered alerts he'd never seen before. Security clearances that went higher than anything in his access level. The file that pulled up was almost entirely redacted, just black bars covering classified information. But a few words broke through. Project Titan Macy v. Operation Nightshade, the Ghost of Hanoi. And at the top, in bright red letters, "Any contact with this individual requires immediate O6+. Notification, do not engage, do not detain, call chain of command immediately." "Holy shit," Davis whispered. He grabbed the direct line to his commander's personal cell. He didn't care that it was 9:47 p.m. The system was screaming at him. The man these Delta operators were harassing wasn't just a veteran. He was a goddamn legend. Back at O'Malley's, Ethan had Bill by the arm, pulling him off the stool. "Come on, old man. Let's go have a chat with—" The door burst open. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just the sudden, heavy presence of 3 black SUVs pulling up outside and 6 men entering the bar with the kind of purpose that makes rooms go silent. They weren't in uniform, but they didn't need to be. Everything about them, the way they moved, the way they scanned the room, the absolute authority in their bearing, screamed military command. Leading them was a man in his 50s, tall and lean with steel-gray hair cut high and tight. His face looked like it had been carved from stone, and his eyes, sharp, cold, and absolutely furious, locked onto the scene at the bar. Colonel James Miller, commander of 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Ethan's boss. Every single operator in the bar went rigid. The color drained from Ethan's face. His hand released Bill's arm like it had turned into molten lava. "Oh, fuck," Mason whispered. Colonel Miller ignored his men completely. His focus was entirely on the old man they'd been harassing. He walked forward, his steps measured and deliberate, until he stood directly in front of Bill. The entire bar held its breath. Then Colonel James Miller snapped to perfect attention and rendered the sharpest, most respectful salute Bill had seen in 40 years. "Mr. Parker," the colonel's voice rang out, clear and reverent, filling every corner of the silent bar. "Colonel James Miller, 1st SFOD. It is an absolute honor, sir." You could have heard a pin drop. Bill, slowly, painfully favoring his bad leg, stood up. He looked at this powerful man saluting him in the middle of a dive bar and gave a single slight nod of acknowledgement. Miller held the salute for 3 full seconds before dropping his hand. Then he turned his gaze to his operators, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "What?" he said softly. And his whisper was more terrifying than any shout. "The hell do you think you're doing?" Ethan's mouth opened. No sound came out. His brain was short-circuiting. His commanding officer, one of the most respected men in special operations, was saluting a frail old man in a bar. It made no sense. "Sir, Mason tried. "Did I ask you to speak?" Miller's voice could have cut steel. "No, sir," Mason whispered. Miller turned slightly, addressing not just his men, but the entire bar. "You see this man?" He gestured to Bill. "You see an old guy in a faded jacket. You see someone you assume is weak, irrelevant, past his time." He took a breath, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. "Let me tell you who I see. I see the man who held Firebase Grizzly for 19 hours with a shattered femur while his team was extracted. I see the man who went into Laos in 1970 on missions so classified that 3 presidents denied they ever happened. I see the man who wrote the close quarters combat manual that you," he pointed at Ethan, "studied in selection. Techniques that have saved your life more times than you know." The bar was frozen. Olivia had tears streaming down her face. Miller stepped closer to Bill's jacket, still lying on the bar where Ethan had thrown it. He gently picked it up, holding it like it was made of gold. "And this patch," Miller said reverently, his finger tracing the worn, faded insignia. "You see garbage. I see the symbol of MACV-SOG, a unit that officially never existed. Ghosts who did impossible things in places they were never supposed to be." He paused, letting the weight settle. And within that unit there was an even smaller element. 4 men, hunter-killers tasked with the most dangerous missions of the Vietnam War, missions that changed the course of history. They were called Titan. Another pause. The silence was deafening. There were only 4 of them. Titan 1 through Titan 4. Most died in the field. Their records were buried. Their names forgotten by everyone except the men whose lives they saved and the enemy who learned to fear them. Colonel Miller turned to face Bill directly, his voice dropping to something almost like awe. "Isn't that right?" Titan 3, the words hung in the air like thunder. Titan 3. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He had heard that name, whispered in hushed tones during advanced training, referenced in classified after-action reports, spoken about like a myth. The ghost of Hanoi. The man who'd infiltrated enemy headquarters. The operator who'd pulled off assassinations so precise, so impossible. That enemy commanders thought he was supernatural. That wasn't just a story. He was standing right here. And Ethan had called him a fraud. The shame was crushing, physical, making it hard to breathe. Mason looked like he might throw up. All 5 operators stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Colonel Miller turned his back on them, a dismissal more devastating than any punishment. "I apologize for my men's behavior." "Sir," Miller said softly to Bill, "it's inexcusable." Bill was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, without anger or bitterness. "They're young, Colonel. They've got fire in them. I remember what that was like." He glanced at Ethan, whose head was bowed in shame. "That fire's what makes 'em good. You just gotta teach 'em when to use it and when to stand down." He picked up his jacket, running his thumb over the faded Titan patch. The patches, the medals, the call signs, they don't matter in the end. What matters is the man next to you. What matters is bringing him home. Everything else is just noise. As he touched the patch, another memory flickered. David dying in his arms, pressing this very patch into his hand, making him promise to carry on, to remember, to honor the fallen. It wasn't a badge of honor. It was a burden, a promise to the dead. Colonel Miller gently touched Bill's shoulder. "Let us give you a ride home, sir." He turned to his aide. "Take care of Mr. Parker's tab here. For life." Then, to his disgraced operators, "My office, 40500 hours. You're all on report." The next month was hell for Ethan and his team. They weren't kicked out. The Army had invested too much, but they were humbled in ways that broke and rebuilt them. They were pulled from operational status. No missions, no deployments. Instead, they spent weeks in archives, reading declassified reports about ESCV-SOG, about Project Titan, about the sacrifices made by men whose names would never be on monuments. They wrote essays on honor, respect, and humility. They met with veterans from that era, listening to stories that made their own accomplishments seem small, and slowly, painfully, they learned. 3 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday night, Ethan walked back into O'Malley's. Alone, no uniform. No bravado. Bill was at his usual spot, staring into his usual drink. Ethan approached slowly, keeping his distance. "Evening, sir." Bill turned, his pale blue eyes assessing. He saw the change immediately. The cocky edge was gone, replaced by something deeper, respect, understanding. "Sir, Ethan's voice cracked. "I came to apologize. For my disrespect. For my ignorance. There's no excuse. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Bill looked at him for a long moment, then nodded to the empty stool beside him. Ethan sat. "What's your name, son?" Bill asked. "Ethan, sir." Bill motioned to Olivia. "Get Ethan here a drink." "Whatever he wants." He turned back to the young operator. "You learn anything from all this?" Ethan stared at his hands. "I learned that the strongest men don't need to prove it. I learned that real honor is quiet. And I learned that I've got a long way to go before I'm half the soldier you are, sir." Bill offered a small, rare smile. He raised his glass slightly. "That's a damn good start." "Son, They sat together in comfortable silence, two warriors from different generations, separated by decades but connected by the same code. After a while, Bill spoke again. "You want to know the truth about being Titan 3? Ethan looked up, surprised. "Sir? It wasn't about being the best. It wasn't about the missions or the kills or the medals they never gave us." Bill's eyes went distant. "It was about the 3 men who didn't make it home. Titan 1, 2, and 4. My brothers. I carry this patch for them. I am them. But that's what it means." Ethan felt tears stinging his eyes. "I understand, sir." "No, you don't," Bill said gently. "Not yet. But you will. And when you do, you'll be the kind of leader your men deserve." Over the next year, something beautiful happened. Ethan and his team became regulars at O'Malley's, not to drink and show off, but to sit quietly with Bill and listen. Really listen. Bill, for his part, began to open up. Slowly, carefully, he shared stories. Not for glory, but to teach. To pass down lessons bought with blood and sacrifice. The young operators learned humility, patience, and the true meaning of service. They became better soldiers and better men. Colonel Miller visited twice, sitting with Bill, sharing a drink, and thanking him for shaping the next generation. Olivia watched it all with tears of joy. Her bar had become a classroom, a shrine, a bridge between past and present. On Bill's 80th birthday, Ethan and the team threw him a surprise party at O'Malley's. The entire Delta Force Command showed up. Olivia made a cake. There were speeches, laughter, and even a few tears when they presented Bill with a brand new Titan patch, professionally made, colors vibrant and perfect. He held it in his shaking hands and wept. "For David," he whispered. "For all of them. For you, sir," Ethan said, his own voice thick with emotion. "For teaching us what it really means to be warriors." That night, as Bill sat surrounded by brothers old and new, the weight he'd carried for 50 years felt just a little lighter. He wasn't alone anymore. The legacy of Titan wasn't forgotten. It was alive in these young soldiers, in their respect, in the lessons learned. And as he looked around the bar, at the faces filled with genuine love and admiration, William Bill Parker, Titan 3, the ghost of Hanoi, the legend who had walked in silence for decades, smiled. Really, truly smiled. He was home. Years later, when Bill finally passed peacefully in his sleep at age 84, his funeral was attended by over 300 special operations personnel, past and present. Ethan, now a team leader himself, carried the casket alongside Mason. Liam, Noah, and Oliver, on Bill's coffin, they placed 2 patches side by side, the old, worn Titan 3 patch he'd carried for 50 years, and the new one they'd given him, still vibrant and perfect. A reminder that legends never truly die. They live on in the warriors they inspire, the lessons they teach, and the respect they earn, not through words, but through a lifetime of quiet, unshakable honor. Colonel Miller gave the eulogy, ending with words that echoed across the cemetery. "We didn't just bury a soldier today. We buried a teacher, a brother, and a piece of living history. But his legacy, Titan 3, will live forever in every operator who learned that true strength is silent. True honor is humble, and true warriors never need to prove what they are. Rest easy. Titan 3, your watch is over. We have it from here." And in O'Malley's bar, Olivia hung a framed photo of Bill above his usual stool, forever reserved, forever honored, forever home. The quiet man who asked for nothing, got everything he deserved: respect, recognition, and a legacy that would never, ever be forgotten. The end, if this story moved you, if it reminded you to respect the quiet heroes among us, share it. Because somewhere out there, another Titan 3 is sitting at a bar, asking for nothing, deserving everything.